Thank you for watching Conversations with Jennylyn. As always, I try to bring you fascinating stories, remarkable, successful people. And today, my guest is no different. He is the president and CEO of Ancora Heart Incorporated, Jeff Kloss. Jeff, welcome to Conversations with Jennylyn.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you today.
Ancora Heart is a medical device company that has developed AccuCinch, the first percutaneous ventricular repair system designed to treat functional mitral regurgitation, dedicated to providing new treatment options for people with heart failure.
And actually, it's there's a couple of corrections in there, and one of them is just newer information. So when the company started, we first were focused on mitral regurgitation, which is your mitral valve in your heart leaks, and when it leaks, your heart doesn't work as well.
Right.
So our original thinking when the company was formed was around a technology that would help improve patients who have mitral regurgitation. And we did some early feasibility studies in that clinical indication with those patients, and it worked well. But what was really interesting is there was a group of patients that did spectacularly well, if you will, in the improvement in heart failure. And so, we became very intrigued with this concept that the ventricular function improved kind of disproportionately better than a lot of other mitral valve therapies did. So we investigated that further and became convinced based on the clinical data that we had a very unique technology to address a significant unmet clinical need with no other therapeutic options. So we really pivoted the company from that original mitral regurgitation focus to now be strictly focused on what's known as congestive heart failure. Patients have enlarged hearts. More technical term is reduced ejection fraction heart failure. And that's the patient population that we're studying now in our US pivotal study that would ultimately be for PMA approval.
That's remarkable. I know from my research when the company was first started, you guys were the first to start with this technology. Is that still true, or are there other companies doing this now?
No, when it comes to, we kind of think of the patients who have an enlarged heart have a structural problem, right? Their heart physically is bigger. And when it gets bigger, it really struggles to pump as efficiently as when it was smaller. And so we kind of think about it as the heart is a structural problem. And our device, which is an implant that goes into the left ventricle, is a structural solution. So it's really directly targeting the fundamental underlying problem of that ventricle in the heart.
Yes.
There are some other therapies that are focused on different mechanisms of action. They might be based on electrical activity, like a CRT some patients will get if they have an arrhythmia in the heart, and some newer therapies, but the mechanism of action of those is very different, and they're focused more on the electrical side. When you think about patients who have an enlarged heart and you want that heart to be smaller, we're still, as far as we know, the only therapy that's really focused on that particular clinical problem in this very specific clinical solution.
Wow. And have you tried many successful cases to date?
So we've treated over 100 patients to date. And quite honestly, what's the clinical results that we evaluated early on is really what led us down the path, as I said, of focusing on heart failure patients. And we did early feasibility studies. In the early feasibility studies, we treated a number of patients. And the results of those patients led us to make the significant investment to an FDA pivotal study, which is, you're probably familiar, is a very expensive endeavor. So you certainly want to have enough clinical experience and enough clinical data to make you really confident that by embarking upon this pivotal study, you have an opportunity to really demonstrate the ultimate clinical value to the patient with that study. And so that's what we've begun to do. And that's really based on the clinical data and the experience we had with patient improvement.
And prior to this technology, did patients with these complaints generally just die? How did they treat them?
That's a good question. So, if we kind of think about what happens today when you get diagnosed with heart failure, the first thing is you're going to go on a series of drugs, medicines, and all designed to improve heart failure symptoms. And you'll see them on TV. And Entresto was a more recent one approved, and that's one that almost all patients that have heart failure are on. There's a newer one that was just approved about a year ago, and now given a class 1 indication by all of the societies, should also be given to a heart failure patient. So there's kind of 4 primary drugs that a patient would get. And the reality of it is heart failure is a progressive disease. And so those patients will continue over time, even with great medicine, will continue to decline. And what most patients do today is they end up dying of heart failure. They might go into hospice. If they're lucky, they might get a heart transplant, but there's, very few of those relative to the number of people that have heart failure.
Right.
They might get an LVAD, which is also a small number. So the number of options when you get really sick are far and few between. And what we look at is there's this huge clinical gap. So once you've had the drugs and they're no longer managing your symptoms until the time that you die or have one of these alternative therapies, there's no solution for you. So, patients become short of breath, they get really tired, they can't do the same level of activity, they're dizzy. It's not a great quality of life. And what we've tried to focus on is that patient group who has absolutely had every available drug that they can have and should have to try to do everything they can to improve the patient. But when those no longer as effective on managing their symptoms, that's where we think our therapy can provide significant benefit.
That is huge. And will there be an age limit, or anybody with this problem will qualify as a candidate?
Yeah, there's no age limit other than you have to be over the age of 18 for being an adult and be able to provide informed consent. The average age of the patients that we treat, however, is kind of reflective of the advanced age population. So, patients are going to be in their 60s and 70s, but that's not to say that we haven't treated some young patients. We've treated patients, as early as in their late 30s. And so, there are people who have family history of the disease. They'll have a genetic component of it. They might have some viral issue. There are some cases in postpartum cardiomyopathy where women who are pregnant don't recover from that process and become into heart failure. So all of those types of things can also affect young people. But generally speaking, it's an older population that you would expect that's in heart failure.
Okay. And since this is a new technology, what kind of difficulties have you experienced as a company over the years?
Well, the most significant challenge we've had is the one that we've all had across the world, which is COVID. And not directly related to our technology or those patients,
Right.
but just, in the middle of a clinical study, right? We launch, we're getting ready to enroll patients. And then what happens? COVID hits and the hospitals get, shut down to all elective procedures and they're focused on COVID care. So, there was a long period of time where we couldn't treat any patients for months while, COVID was kind of running through not only the US, but Europe. And they got a little bit better and we started to do a few more cases and then it got worse again and then we stopped again. So I'd say, kind of from an overall strategy business, trying to continue to manage the business, COVID has been a significant impact. Now, the good news is we don't see that today, right? COVID still is with us. It's all around us, but it hasn't affected us now in the same way that it did in, 2020, 2021. So I think that's the good news is I feel like that's behind us, but clearly we had a very challenging time when, we were in the deep, dark days of the original COVID wave.
So when can the world expect to have this service or this device at our fingertips?
Well, they have potential access through our clinical study right now. So if a patient was diagnosed with heart failure and was symptomatic after optimal drug therapy and they qualified for the study, they would have an opportunity to receive the therapy. It is a randomized study. So some patients are going to get controlled treatment, which means they're going to remain on those optimal guideline-directed therapy drugs, and other patients would receive the therapy. We would expect probably in the next 3 years to gain FDA approval. And at that point, we could begin to commercialize in the United States. And right now, our focus has been in the United States, just been, the logistics of COVID the last few years
Yes.
and really trying to keep all of our energy here in one particular market.
That's very, very exciting. So if someone is watching this show and they feel like they are a potential candidate, are you just taking people who are interested in being part of the studies?
Well, the first thing we would suggest is that they reach out to their cardiologist and have that discussion with their cardiologist.
Right.
And that would begin that process of, trying to determine whether they might even be eligible for it. But the suggestion would be is to contact their cardiologist and have that conversation.
So are cardiologists in the United States already using this as part of the trials?
Yes. So we have about 50 hospitals in the United States right now that are actively involved in our clinical study and are screening and evaluating patients to include into the study. So it's an active, ongoing clinical trial in the United States right now.
Wow, that means you're getting close to bringing it here so everyone can use it if they qualify.
Yeah, exactly.
This is really great. What haven't I asked you that you want to make sure we get covered in this interview that we need to know about this?
Well, I think if you think about heart failure patients, of which it's a significant healthcare problem, not only in the United States but worldwide. Heart disease in general and heart failure in particular is a rapidly growing epidemic level problem.
Right.
And so I think one of the things that we look at is we would certainly hope that when patients are first diagnosed with heart failure, that they receive the best care that they can from a heart failure specialist. I mean, it's a bit of a specialty within a specialty, right? There's cardiology, but then there's also heart failure. And being able to manage those patients with all of the great drugs that are available, I would certainly hope and expect that people reach out to that, because we do know that even with all those great drugs available, the number of patients that are on the right drugs and the right dosage of those drugs that have heart failure is unfortunately a really small percent. So, kind of as a global community, we need to make sure that patients actually reach out and have access to those drugs to actually improve them, because they absolutely improve mortality. They improve the quality of life for a period of time. And then we would look at the opportunity to continue to treat them when those drugs are not quite as effective and they become more symptomatic.
Right. So people are generally afraid of things that are new. A lot of times you'll hear them say, well, let them try it on this many people first before I am willing to have it tried on me. For the benefit of those people, would you please explain to us how the system works?
Well, so it's a least invasive procedure. So, you think about when you hear about, cardiology treatments, you think open heart surgery and they open your chest up and fix your heart. Well, this is all catheter based. So it's a least invasive. Over half the patients will go home the following day from the therapy, from the treatment, and almost all patients go home after 2 days. So, I mean, it's not an outpatient procedure, but it's also, a very quick recovery period. And so, we think that, from a patient that's trying to decide whether this is appropriate for them, that's going to be one thing they want to know is, well, what happens to me after the procedure? How long does it take to recover? And that part is actually quite short. I think what we find is there's patients that will get to the point where, if you ask a patient, and there's been a lot of studies that say, would you rather live longer feeling like you feel, which is not very good every day? They want to do basic stuff. They want to go to the mailbox at the end of the driveway and get their mail. They want to walk to the gate at the airport. They just want to do simple stuff, and they can't do simple stuff. And I think when they get to that point, that's when people start to make that own evaluation personally of, do I want to keep living longer like this, or would I actually want to have an opportunity to feel better? And, right now, that's what we're focused on, is we believe, and our data would suggest that we can help those patients feel a lot better. We can make them have a better quality of life. We can improve their exercise capability of going to the mailbox and going to their little league game with their grandchildren. So, I think people have to make their own decision, right, of what's important to them and how they feel. And if they're to that point, those typically are the patients that would come to us and say, look, I'm interested in the opportunity to make an improvement in how I feel and maybe make an improvement in my long-term survival, but I'm really interested in not living how I feel every day. And, that becomes a certain motivation for patients that really don't feel good every day. And you and I, fortunately, I don't have heart failure yet. I don't understand that, right? And only that individual can make that decision about how they evaluate. Do I want to try something, in a clinical study or not? And, they kind of finally come to that conclusion of whether it's important for them to try to have an opportunity to seek treatment to solve something that otherwise they don't have any other option for.
Well, most of these new devices, somehow they get approved and they get used in European markets a lot sooner than ours. But since you guys are American based, does that mean our markets will be privy to the use of it before other countries?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's always a question of, is there regulatory and, kind of business considerations, what other markets you want to go to. And, although for Europe, people always think about it's the European Union, you get a CE mark, there's kind of a common market. And that is true from a regulatory standpoint. So it kind of looks and feels a little more like an FDA.
Mm-hmm.
But where it gets a lot more complicated is then the individual countries have their own healthcare systems and their own reimbursement systems. So the challenge to launch, for example, in a European market is, although it looks like one market from a CE mark in the European Union,
Yes.
It's actually 27 different markets with individual reimbursement and economic systems, and each one of those has to be done separately. So it's quite a lot of investment to do that. And then you look at the United States, we have 50 states, where they're all, for the most part, part of the same system, right? Different insurance companies, but
Right.
Medicare is national. So it's a little bit easier to navigate with the FDA, one regulatory process, and then also from a reimbursement system, in that, you're kind of dealing with a known entity in one large market. So it makes it a lot more complicated early on to go to Europe right now. And that's why we've chosen to focus in the United States. At some point, will we go to Europe and expand internationally? Sure. We would love to do that, but we also have to be very focused in, what we do with our time, energy, and resources to make sure that we're successful in one place.
Of course, because you spend so much money on these types of devices, you have some recuperation to be concerned about.
Exactly.
So is it going to be something that's covered by insurance? Because a lot of these new products and services, they often cost so much that even if insurance companies cover it, sometimes doctors are a little reluctant to prescribe them.
Well, that is, the reimbursement process, whether it's through Medicare or insurance companies, is certainly complicated. Our patient population, for the most part, is going to be a Medicare eligible patient because they're elderly. So most of the patients who would receive this therapy are likely going to have some form of Medicare, or if they have a Medicare Advantage plan from a commercial insurer, which is really just an extension of Medicare. So our goal and responsibility is to work with CMS and the Medicare group to get reimbursement for this device. And that's kind of an ongoing process now with the FDA and CMS to try to do a better job coordinating reimbursement. So when you get FDA approval, you have a known kind of clear path of how you can get reimbursed such that patients can access this. And there's active dialogue going on right now to try to figure out how to do a better coordination to allow patients to access this therapy earlier than maybe in the past with some of these newer therapies, where it took them a long time to get the clinical evidence to show Medicare that they should pay for it. So hopefully with innovation like this, there's going to be a little bit more flexible and newer system to allow patients to access the therapy and then also access reimbursement for it.
This is great. And at the moment, there isn't anything similar you know of on the market currently that is being used for this particular concern in patients.
Yeah, that's right. When it comes to a catheter-based implant like this, we're the only device that we're aware of at this point in time. Not to say that there's not a lot of smart people working in quiet to come up with another alternative therapy. And quite honestly, I think that would be great, because it would just, expand the market and give patients more opportunity, because, not every patient is perfect for every device either, right? There's different variabilities. So there's plenty of opportunity. And I suspect, and I hope at some point we will see competition and alternative therapies that will be available to these patients.
Well, competition is good and healthy. It keeps us on our toes and keeps us on a competitive edge.
Absolutely.
Jeff, I know you're very busy. I am so grateful you've taken this time to share the information about this for me and my viewers, because I think it's huge. When it is on the market, I'm hoping we could do another follow-up interview so that we can let everyone know it's here, it's now, and go see your doctor if you have a problem that involves probably having treatment with the catheter, AccuCinch system that you have. Before we go, could you explain what that means to people who don't know, AccuCinch?
Well, the implant, when we actually put it into the heart, if you remember, the heart is enlarged. And so when we place the implant in, kind of the simplest description, it's like putting a belt on the inside of the heart. And just like when you tighten up your belt to pull your pants around your waist, we do the same thing. We put that device into the heart, we cinch it down, meaning we reduce it and pull it like a belt buckle, excuse me, and that cinches the heart. So the cinch comes from that part. The AccuCinch really refers to the fact that, we believe we can consistently and accurately put that device into the heart, for patient after patient in a very predictable, consistent way. So we just came up with that name of AccuCinch. So we're accurately trying to cinch the heart and help patients improve their symptoms.
Well, I just want you to know on behalf of myself and everyone watching this interview, how grateful and proud we are of you and your team at Ancora Health, because I know this is a lot of work and consistency. And these types of new procedures, you have to be so accurate and concise, because when you do release it, you want it to be really doing that it has been created to do. So thank you so much. And is there anything else you want to leave with my viewers before I wrap this up?
No, I think that's been great. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we're doing, and more importantly, what we're trying to do to help patients improve their life and potentially live a little bit longer with otherwise debilitating conditions. So thanks very much for the opportunity today.
Thank you for your time. And thank you for watching Conversations with Jennylyn. I'm sure you're as excited as I am about this new technology that is coming to the market soon to benefit all those who need it. And I promise to bring Jeff back soon with more great news. And I will see you next time. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you very much.